Hey there, welcome back to In the Spotlight with Kelly Sikowski. We're continuing our conversation with our series Roots of the Region, where we talk to farmers who are growing food, stewarding the land, and keeping Virginia's history of agriculture alive. With me this morning is Jesse Straight from Whiffletree Farm. Jesse, it's so great to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, and I'm glad we're finally connecting here.
Absolutely. So let's talk about how did your family get into farming?
Yeah, so my parents are not farmers. My grandfather grew up on a potato farm in Maine, but then he worked his career at the USDA. So kind of skipped a generation. I was a normal kid, grew up in Warrenton, Virginia. You had no interest in agriculture, though we lived near farmland. And eventually, went off to UVA, studied religious studies and pre-med. Again, like not farm agriculture was not on the radar. And my wife and I got married the summer after I graduated, and a friend of ours gave us a book by Wendell Berry. Some of your audience might know the name, but he's a really wonderful author and wrote some great some essays, fiction, and poetry. And he really caught my imagination. And at the time, I was really sort of like floundering about trying to figure out what kind of work I wanted to do, and really like inspired me. And that, Wendell Berry was sort of the poet that kind of gave me a vision of the life that was really compelling. And then I later on, a little bit later on, stumbled across Joel Salatin at Polyface Farm in Stanton, Virginia. And through his books and in relationship with him, he was a bit of a mentor to me as I got going. And he sort of laid out for someone like myself who didn't have any business farming or running a business, some guidelines about how to farming practices that again were compelling, regenerative, health, healing for the land, the animals, the people who eat the food, but then also like a practical business plan of how you can actually make a living doing this. So that was sort of how we were able to go from normal suburban kids who knew nothing to then like eventually working into it. And in 2009, we stayed in and lived and worked in Charlottesville for about 4 years after college, and then moved back to my hometown of Warrington to start the business in 2009. And we just started very small, got 50 baby chicks in the mail. I was all nervous, Nelly, like didn't know what I was doing. And am I going to like kill all these birds and all this stuff? But, we figured it out. And we kind of just lots of mistakes, but lots of good mentors, like I mentioned, and grew the production, grew the customer base, to the point now where we're doing about 16,000 meat birds a year, about 3,000 laying hens at a time, a couple hundred pigs a year, a couple hundred head of cattle, and about 1,000 turkeys for Thanksgiving. We, everything we move to fresh pasture on a almost daily basis. So that's our big distinction. That's what we're so proud of, and that's what we think makes what we do so important. So animals are constantly moving to fresh pasture. We don't use GMO feeds. We don't use antibiotics. We don't use chemical wormers. We don't use any chemical hormones. There's no chemical applications on the soil. And we just try and set animals up to fulfill their nature so they can thrive and do well. We haven't had a vet to the farm in over a decade. And we other things, parts of the work is, we slaughter and process our own poultry, which is really great. We can have that quality control and we can see the process from start to finish. And then in terms of how we actually sell, we have a farm store on the property. We do neighborhood deliveries around DC, Northern Virginia, Central Virginia. We have wholesale customers, restaurants, butchers, things like that. And we sell whole, half, and quarter animals. So that's another big part of our business model, is that we're selling directly to the customer. We're obviously not like on a contract with Purdue or Tyson's or Cargill. And so we can sort of bypass that monopoly control of the market and go straight to the customer with what we think is a really distinctive product that is, like I said, healing for the land, healing for the animals, and healing for the people that eat it. So that's us in a nutshell.
Let's circle back to what you were saying in the beginning. You and your wife did not grow up as farm kids.
That's right.
Whose idea was it that you know what? Let's get us some chicken.
Yeah. So my wife was totally on board with the eating of this food. So we started eating food like this before we started raising food like this. And, just once you sort of look into it, and if, like, let's just say hypothetically you were to walk through a confined poultry house and you saw chickens on concrete inside a steel building, I think most people would just intuitively know, like, this is not what this animal is meant for. Like, they were meant to actually have a relationship with soil and plants and fresh air and sunlight. And then if you were to walk through, our fields and see our birds on fresh pasture, you'd be like, wow, this is beautiful. This is great. So anyway, those arguments, both for the nature of the animal and what makes sense that regard, and then also the health of the food, and then also wanting to not, be a part of a system that exploits animals, that exploits people, that exploits the land. Those are all reasons that, my wife was 100% like, we need to eat this way for all these reasons. She was not pushing hardcore, we should start a farm business. But like I mentioned, I was a bit of an angsty, like 20, early 20-year-old, 20s, early 20s, lots of hand wringing. um, and So I think more than anything, she just wanted me to land on something that I was really happy with and inspired by. And yeah, that's how it worked out, where it came to me that I was like, you know what? Of all the things that sort of fits who I am, makes me excited, fits parts about my past I've seen, things I've gravitated towards, kinds of work. I think this makes a lot of sense. And so she was very supportive in that. And she's definitely, yeah, we've been through some tough times. And, there could be very legitimate, wives and mothers who would be like, stop, do something else. This is not working. But she hung in there. And so, yeah, I would say it was sort of my idea, but very much her on board.
So you had the chicken first. How did you decide to expand into like pork and pigs and cows?
Yeah, so we started with meat chickens, then we went to laying hens, then turkeys, then pigs, then beef cattle. I mean, large part of it was that example of Joel Salatin and Polyface Farm, and also just thinking about what makes sense for the land and also what makes sense for the market. So on the land side, there's a lot of symbiosis to have herbivores like beef cattle and birds like poultry interacting together. They eat different parts of the pasture, their manures and impact benefits the soil and land in different and beneficial ways. They benefit each other in different ways by both being on the land together. So there's, ecological symbiosis that happens there. But then on the market side, for me to convince you to drive to our farm store and say, just get eggs, that's going to be a harder sell than be like, hey, come get all your proteins, get your eggs, your chicken, your pork, your turkey, your beef. And we sell other things too that we outsource. But yeah, just in terms of a business model that would make sense where, we're already asking someone to do something a little bit weird, which is like, don't go to the strip mall, don't go to the grocery store, like drive 3 miles outside of town, come to our sort of rinky dink farm store and get really awesome food. And we're just trying to like make that less weird, make that less of a burden, and offer more of the full diet.
I'm going to share my screen here so people can see the website because you have beef, you have pork, you have the
Yep.
eggs, and you have
Yep.
chicken.
Yep.
You also welcome people to come to the farm and
That's
see
right.
what
Yep.
life is like.
Yep. Yeah, so that's a big part of our mission. So, we want to like I said, raise food in such a way that's healing for the land, the animals, and the people. But we want to do that also in transparency. And part of, we feel, one of our unfair advantages is, we're probably 45 minutes away from 3 million people. And most of those 3 million people don't get to see what they can see when they come here. So our farm is incredibly beautiful, and to see the happy sight of animals on fresh pasture living lives they were meant to live, like, cheers the heart. It really is beautiful. And we want our customers to experience that joy and to know that they're partnering with us to bring that about. That obviously all this would go kaput if no one bought our food. And so it's only the people buying our food that facilitates this good work. And we want them to enjoy that. We want them to see it, to walk around. And actually, that's one of my goals for this quarter is I'm going to be improving some of the trails around the farm, actually marking them, having maps, and opening up more of the farm to make it easier for customers to come and, take a nice walk through the woods and by the stream and see the animals and see us moving animals to fresh pasture. So anyway, that's something we want to, open up more. We don't want to go down the road of sort of like the goofy agritourism, like launching pumpkins, things like that. We want to do more like integrity. Come here, experience the beauty, experience the peace, and see what this is all about, and enjoy yourself. It's an incredibly beautiful place.
But you've mentioned a couple of times about moving animals like to fresh pastures. It is really a phenomenal way to replenish the soil. I think that
Yep.
people forget about that because we've gone to sort of the factory farming
Yeah.
method. The dirt lots and there's cement or concrete under their
Yeah.
feet. When you have the ability on the land to rotate where your cattle are grazing or where they're spending
Yeah.
their time, you're actually feeding that dirt back with all the good things to
Totally.
help and keep growing there.
That's right. Yep.
That's
That's
really
totally true.
important. So
Yeah,
let's
it is.
transition. What was the moment where you realized like this is going to work?
Yeah, so I mean, it was, as I kind of alluded to, a bit of a rocky start. Like we lived on a very modest budget, and I worked a lot to start things up. When we moved back to Warrington, I had a little like home handyman business that was just me doing little carpentry projects while I built up the farm business, and I was able to sort of grow the farm business and sort of um, decrease the carpentry side over the course of 3 years. So I was able to go full time at about 3 years. So in
Mhm.
one sense, that's when like I knew it was kind of working, and that like, okay, great, the business can support my family, and I don't have to do the carpentry stuff. I can do the farming full time. Again, that's very modest. And I think we're still like, there's always the next challenge. So, now my kids are starting to get older, and I'm thinking, we have 6 full-time employees. And I'm always thinking about ways we can improve. I love for our systems of how we, our operations side of how we manage the animals and raise the animals and process the animals. Those are all things that can always be made better, both for the animals' sake, the land's sake, and for us, the workers' sake. So there's always there things I want to improve on operations. But like I mentioned with my kids, I'm thinking about, I'd love it if any of my kids were interested in working in the business. So, thinking about those transitions and how to set things up for people to have success. Yeah, so those would be some of the things that, it's certainly not like just smooth sailing. There's plenty of like challenges, at different phases in the business. And those are some of the ones I'm, thinking more about now.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions people might have about being a farmer in this day and age?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I could speak so much to just like in general being a farmer. Well, I guess a couple of sort of like tropes that are often said that really kind of like squeeze my soul are when people talk about, oh, how you don't want to go into farming, you can't make a living doing that. Everyone knows that's just like kind of like something people do to like because they love it, but it's a waste of money kind of thing. And I certainly understand why they're saying that, because unfortunately, so much of the time that is true. But I think the sad part about that is it's not true for everyone. And I would hate to kill people's dreams where if they just thought, oh, hey, like being a contract farmer for Purdue, like, yeah, the prospects don't look great on that. Um, but like my family, we're not getting rich doing this, but we live a great life and we love our life and we love our work. And if there's someone out there who's like, man, I'd love to raise animals in a way that like fit their nature and gave great food and built the topsoil, and I got to be out there doing that work, I would hate for them to hear those sort of Debbie Downer comments and take that as sort of the gospel truth and not know that there's a third way. Like what we're doing does work. And by work, I mean it works ecologically and it works to actually make a living. So that's one thing that's sort of like a banner I want to raise is like, don't take that as the gospel truth. There is a way to do good work. And if you want to get, gobs and gobs of money and get awfully rich, like, yeah, don't do what I'm doing. But if you want to live a really, really great life, do what I'm doing, because it is, and you can make a good living. And we live off of a single income off of this farm. We're expecting our ninth child, and we have a wonderful life. Like I said, not rich, but we have a great life. So that's one thing I'd like to say. And then the other kind of maybe, I don't know, misconception or misunderstanding that's sort of broadly out there that I love to have the opportunity to speak to is that people think that what we're doing is sort of like special food. It's like the rich people's food. And oh, that's so nice. You're doing that precious little thing over there for the rich people to buy their food. And I think that's so sad and so misplaced, because we're actually not doing anything special. Like, we're actually doing something really, really normal, which is giving an animal the life it was meant to live. The other stuff, the stuff where you stick animals in a barn, that's the weird stuff. We're the normal guys. It just so happens the normal guys are the minority. But still, like, what we're doing is we're not like massaging animals. We're not like playing classical music to, chickens. That's not what we're about. We're about like thinking about how does a chicken like to live, and let's give them that life. And of course that will have repercussions to the health of the land, to the health of the animal, and to the health of the food. This isn't fancy, this is just sensible. And so that's the other thing I really love to sort of get out there, is like, this isn't fancy, this is sensible.
It's essentially a return to what farming used to look like.
Yeah.
The way we
Yeah.
used to do things before we got industrialized, kind of.
Yes, I think that's true to a good extent. Yeah.
All right. So, what would be the best way for people to support local farms like yours?
Well, it's like kind of a no-brainer, but it's buy our food, So it's like, now, of course, that's easier said than all what that means. So you're like, oh gosh, well, now I got to spend more money on food. I got to drive out of my way. I got to spend more time in the kitchen because it's not all conveniently pre-cooked and pre-cut and everything else. And I think, yeah, it's true. You do, but like, it's worth it. It's worth it for your health, for your family's health, for the system that you're a part of. And like, what are the alternatives? Like, actually spending time in your kitchen, working with food that's maybe less processed, and therefore you have to do more work with it. Like, spend quality time in the kitchen with your family. And maybe it does require some saying no to some things to say yes to some better things. So maybe it's not like, okay, you can't do all the ballet and all the soccer and all the whatever because you got to spend more time together in the kitchen. Like, is that worse? Or maybe you got to, rearrange your family budget a little bit so that, you're spending more money on food and less money on entertainment or eating out, or, whatever it is. I know that you get into touchy ground here telling people how to spend their money, but I'm just trying to put out there is, the best way to support us is to buy our food, and to know, like, I am not getting rich here. I'm not taking advantage of anyone. I'm charging prices that are very fair. Probably even too low, but still. And then, I just ask you, think about saying those yes to those things, saying no to some things to say to yes to some other things, and how that might actually make you and your family better and happier.
Into a couple of fun questions.
Okay, great.
Do you have a favorite season on the farm, like that perfect time of year?
Gosh, I feel like I'm always trying to figure out which is my favorite. So maybe I'll cheat a little bit here, and I'll say, like, who doesn't love the spring? It's so beautiful. We have like baby lambs frolicking through beautiful lush pasture. The baby pigs are
How
just
about the
running around.
baby lamb? That's the winner. You've got
Oh
baby
yeah,
animals,
baby
that's
lambs are
the
like,
edge.
yeah, baby lambs are like stuffed animals that came alive. They're ridiculous. So it's just such a beautiful and joyful time. But also, like, I do love the fall. It's so peaceful. And for me, the winter is sort of much less intense. So the fall is a bit of sort of like, all right, starting to exhale, like the big push, spring through summer through fall is, can be kind of exhausting. And then, winter, like, I love fires in the wood stove. I love all the work around that. So I don't know if I guess I'll say fall is my favorite, but the other ones have so many good things.
It's hard to compete with the baby lamb thing.
Yeah.
All right, what's your favorite meal that you make with the meat that comes from your farm?
Yeah. Okay. So probably my most recent one was we do like a shaved steak, like a kind of a Philly cheesesteak kind of thing, a very thinly sliced shaved steak. And so I sauteed onions, I sauteed peppers, I grated some of our farm store cheese. I just real quick in a cast iron cooked up the shaved steak. Actually, we had some leftover homemade marinara sauce that I warmed up. So then we had sourdough bread from the farm store we have, toasted that, onions, peppers, the steak, a little of the marinara sauce on that, the cheese melted on it, the sourdough toasted. It was incredible. So yeah, I could eat that like 3 days a week. It was
That sounds
awesome.
good. I've not thought of marinara on a Philly cheesesteak. So,
Yeah, I didn't plan for it, but I was like, instead of like ketchup, it was like this is a tastier, condiment. Yeah.
sugar too, probably.
Yeah.
Did you have an embarrassing moment from the farm? There's always that one lesson you learned a really hard, messy way. Do you have any of those kind of stories to share?
Oh, sure. The one that comes to mind, I mean, there's lots of mistakes, especially for someone like myself who's got into this not from a farming background, lots of mistakes. One, I don't know if embarrassing would be the primary emotion I would describe, but I don't know if you remember there was this superstorm Sandy. I think it was like I forget what year it was. Yeah, you remember that? Okay, so we had turkeys that were getting ready for, it was later in the fall, and turkeys were getting ready to be slaughtered for Thanksgiving. Superstorm Sandy rolled in, and it was about 4 days of like 35-degree rain. It was just windy, rainy, and just miserable. And the housing that we had for the turkeys was insufficient for that kind of weather. And so the turkeys were just getting soaked and freezing and starting to die of hypothermia. And I had hundreds of turkeys out in pasture with, like not sufficient shelter. And I remember just going out there for hours by myself, just soaked to the bone, not a dry piece of clothing on me, colder than I've ever been before, just miserable, and also doing miserable work, like trying to save these turkeys and get them into the barn where they could dry up. And we lost a lot of turkeys. I felt terrible for like, not giving them a setup to account for this kind of situation. Um, Very kindly, my parents showed up halfway through the day and helped me also through the misery, and that was very touching. But that was definitely like a heartbreaking moment where I knew that I had kind of failed the animals, and here we are, like days before slaughter, so there's like the waste there, and it was just the most miserable I've ever felt in my life, both like physically and emotionally. So that would be like probably a low point that I've experienced. Maybe not embarrassing as much as just sort of like, oh man, Jesse, you messed this one up, and this is pretty bad. So that was definitely a low point.
Also, it's kind of, I mean, that's not a normal weather event for Virginia. It's not like you have
Sure.
hurricane ready
Yeah.
housing always.
Right.
But that much, so did Boynton get hit by the ice storm that we had in, I think, January, February?
Yes. Yeah. That was pretty tough. We did.
What does that look like for you guys trying to navigate that? I mean, the layers of ice.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. We had our lane hens, our pigs, and our cattle. We don't do the meat birds in the winter because it's not good for the birds or the pasture to be out there when the soil
Mhm.
and plants are dormant. So we're dealing with them, but we had the lane hens, the pigs, and the cattle, and yeah, just the challenge of keeping the animals with not frozen water is a big
Yeah.
challenge in that weather. And our cattle were at a farm that's probably a farm we rented that's probably about 25 minutes away or so. So yeah, it was very challenging. My toes and fingers were sort of like burning with felt like they're on fire with the cold. And there was particularly that one night when the storm first rolled in, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to get to the animals. And I was even considering driving my tractor, the whatever it is, 15 miles to try and get there. thankfully the landowners very kindly went out and so did my cattle chores for me that day while the roads got cleared, which I was so grateful for. But yeah, that was definitely a challenge, and grateful that Virginia winters are not usually like that.
Without
Yeah,
bizarre events.
yeah.
Final question. What's the thing that keeps you guys going?
I think the thing that keeps us going and the kind of the whole reason we exist is because of what we're doing with the lands, with the animals on pasture. So there's just so few people out there that are actually moving animals to fresh pasture. You know, if the grocery stores were chock full of the food the way we raise it,
Mhm.
I'd be like, no biggie. What are we here for? You know, but it's just not the case. Like to do the hard work of actually moving animals onto fresh pasture in a way that cares for the animals and cares for the pasture is so unusual and is also so beneficial for both the land, the animals, and the food. It's very easy to keep going. It's very easy to see like we are doing really great work, and that way we're really distinctive. But then also when you see it firsthand, when I'm out there moving hens to fresh pasture and I see how much they love what I'm doing, you know, where they're getting the fresh, they're just chomping the fresh grass down like it's a pasta dinner, and they're catching the bugs and they're chasing each other, trying to steal the bugs out of each other's mouth. You know, it's like the animals are telling me like what I'm doing is right. And I can see it in front of my eyes. Um, and we also get tons of great feedback from our customers in terms of like
Mhm.
the taste of the food, and the customers who have had chronic health issues that doctors couldn't fix, and they're eating our food and the problems are going away. And so there's all those things that are great affirmations of the good work we're doing. Yeah, and then also just too, like personally, like my personality, I just love to be outside, working outside, working with my hands, working with my body, and to do that, to do something that's so obviously good is an easy thing to be excited to do.
But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today, Jesse. This
Yeah,
has been another episode of In the Spotlight, Roots of the Region. We're talking with Jesse from Whiffletree Farm out in Warrenton, Virginia, about the reason that farmers do the hard work. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and have a great day.
yeah. Thanks, Kelly. Good to talk to you.